Welcome to the beginning of our lessons on music theory. You may have done music theory in the past with me. We're going to go right back to the beginning this year, and this will probably be a few years of information to get through to learn everything. So this year, it's this nice, slow, easy start. So the first topic that we're going to cover when it comes to music theory is things that have to do with elements of pitch. So let's jump in. So the keyboard and octave ranges. So pitch in music refers to the highness or lowness of a sound. Pitches are named by using the first 7 letters of the alphabet: A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. We will approach the notation of pitch by relating this pitch alphabet to the keyboard. So those letters will be translated onto the piano keyboard, using C's as an example, as we see here. The C nearest the middle of the keyboard is called middle C, or C4. Higher C's, that's moving toward the right-hand side of the keyboard, are named C5, C6, and so on. Lower C's, moving towards the left of the keyboard, are named C3, C2, and C1. Below C1 are followed by zeros, as in B0 and A0. Those are the ones down there. All the C's on the piano are labeled in the example that you can see. So you can see here C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, C7, and C8. From any C up or down to the next C is called an octave. All the pitches from one C up to, but not including the next C, are said to be in the same octave register. As we see here, the white keys above C4 would be named D4 because it is in the same octave register. But the white key below C4 would be named B3 because it is in the lower octave register. When it comes to notation on the SAF, our system of musical notation is similar to a graph in which time is indicated on the x-axis and pitch is shown on the y-axis. We can see here R occurs before S in time, and it is higher than S in pitch. The staff is used in music to indicate the precise pitch desired. A staff consists of 5 lines and 4 spaces, but it may be extended indefinitely through the use of ledger lines. Here we see 3 ledger lines above and 3 ledger lines below the staff of 5 lines. A clef must appear at the beginning of the staff in order to indicate which pitches are to be associated with which lines and spaces. The 3 different clefs commonly used today are shown here, and the position of C4 in each is illustrated. Notice that the C clef appears in either of 2 positions. So our first clef here is a treble clef. And if you notice that little curly bit down on the end, it circles right around a line. The second line up, that line is G. Because this specifies where G is, this is also known as G clef. Notice that if you started from that G and counted each space and line with letters, we would go from G, F, E on the bottom line, D below that, and then finally C4 on that first ledger line. Next, we have a bass clef, also known as F clef, because if you look at those 2 little dots beside the bass clef, they are on either side of F. Now, if we were to start from that F and go up, we would go F, G, A in the first line, top line, B, and then C. That's also our C4. The next two clefs look very similar. They sort of look like vertical lines with two backward C's. Sometimes they get illustrated more like K's. That middle place where they meet, that is signifying middle C. So on the first one, this is alto clef, and it shows us that middle C is on the middle line. The next one we see beside it is tenor clef, and it shows us that middle C is on the second line from the top. These clefs are shown in the positions that are in common use today, but you may occasionally find them placed differently on the staff in some editions. Wherever they appear, the design of the G clef circling G4, the dots of the F clef surrounding F3, and the C clef is centered on C4. The grand staff is a combination of two staves joined by a brace, with the top and bottom staves using treble and bass clefs, respectively. Various pitches are notated and labeled on the grand staff as we see here. Pay special attention to the way in which ledger lines are used on the grand staff. For instance, the notes C4 and A3 appear twice in this example, once in relation to the top staff and once in relation to the bottom staff. Take a few moments now to complete the questions in 1-1. Continuing on, the major scale. Here you will learn about major and minor scales, the scales that form the basis of tonal music. However, there are many other types of scales, some of which will be covered much later on. The major scale is a specific pattern of small steps, called half steps, and large ones, called whole steps, encompassing an octave. A half step is the distance from a key on the piano to the very next key, white or black. So you see here they illustrate E to F and B to C. But if we were to go from E down to that black note above it, that would be E to E flat. That would also be a half step. So the half steps are between every single note, not just the big white ones. Using only the white keys on the piano keyboard, there are two half steps in each octave. So we have that there in the example as well. A whole step skips the very next key and goes instead to the following one. Using only the white keys on the keyboard, there are 5 whole steps in each octave. So here you see C to D, a whole step, D to E, a whole step. In the previous example, E to F, a half step, F to G, a whole step, G to A, whole step, A to B, whole step, B to C, back to the previous one was a half step. The major scale pattern of whole and half steps is the same as that found on the white keys from any C up to the next C. In the next diagram, the numbers with carets above them, those are the little hats, are scale degree numbers for the C major scale. You can see from this diagram that half steps in the major scale occur only between scale degree 3, 4, and 7 and 1. So when we put those hats above the numbers, that is telling us scale degree. The letters do not matter. Notice also that the major scale can be thought of as two identical 4-note patterns separated by a whole step. These 4-note patterns are called tetrachords. So here we have C, D, E, F. So that's a whole half. Then there's G, A, B, C, whole half, with the difference between F and G being that whole step. If we examine the steps on the white keys of a G to G octave, as in the example, we do not find the same pattern of whole and half steps that occur in the C to C octave. In order to play a G major scale, we would need to skip the F key and play the black key that is between F and G. We will label that key with an accidental, that is, a symbol that raises or lowers a pitch by a half or whole step. All the possible accidentals are here. So we have a double sharp, which is notated with an X. That raises a note a whole step. There is a sharp, which looks like the hashtag symbol, and that raises the note a half step. There is a natural sign, which there's not really anything else that we draw that looks like that, and it cancels a previous accidental. Then there's the flat, which kind of looks like a lowercase b, and that lowers the note a half step. And then there's the double flat, which is just two flat symbols beside each other, and that lowers the note a whole step. So we can make our G scale conform to the major scale pattern by adding one accidental, in this case a sharp. So we want to see that same pattern that we saw in C of whole, whole, half, a whole break, and then whole, whole, half. Without having that F sharp, we have whole, whole, half, break, whole, half, whole. So we need to raise that F to make sure that it fits in. It is important to understand that major and minor scales always use all the letter names of the musical alphabet. It would not be correct to substitute G flat for the F sharp in a G major scale. So you want to have everything. If you were to start on B, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B with accidentals in there, but you will always have all the letters. So notice that when we write or say the names of notes and accidentals, we put the accidental last, as in F sharp. But in staff notation, the accidental always precedes the note that it modifies, as we can see in this example. This is so that when we're reading, we read the modification first before we play the note. However, when we communicate it, we communicate the alteration afterwards. The major key signatures. So one way to learn the major scales is by means of the pattern of whole and half steps discussed previously. Another is by memorizing the key signatures associated with the various scales. The term key is used in music to identify the first degree of a scale. For instance, the key of G major refers to the major scale that begins on G. A key signature is a pattern of sharps or flats that appears at the beginning of a staff and indicates that certain notes are to be consistently raised or lowered. There are 7 key signatures using sharps. In each case, the number of the major key can be found by going up a half step from the last sharp. So we see here a number of different key signatures that have sharps in their key signature. For G major, our last sharp is an F sharp, so if we go up a semitone, that takes us to G. In D major, our last sharp is C sharp, so we go up a semitone, that takes us to D. So on and so forth. If we want to go all the way to C sharp major, our last sharp is a B sharp, which is actually the same note as C, which I'm sure we'll cover later on. So we have to raise that, and that brings us to C sharp. There are also 7 key signatures using flats. Except for the key of F major, the name of the major key is the same as the name of the next to last flat. So we can see here F major, like they said, this trick doesn't work there. You just have to remember that F major has 1 flat. But if we look at B flat major, you go to the second to last flat, which is a B flat. Tells you you're in B flat major. E flat major, We go to our second to last flat, and that's an E flat major, so on and so forth, until we get all the way down to the end for C flat major. Our last flat is a F flat, and the one before that is a C flat. You may have noticed that there are 3 pairs of major keys that would sound exactly the same. That is, they would be played on the very same keys of the piano keyboard. They are B major and C flat major, F sharp major and G flat major, and C sharp major and D flat major. Notes that are spelled differently but sound the same are said to be enharmonic. So B major and C flat major, for example, are enharmonic keys. If 2 major keys are not enharmonic, then they are transpositions of each other. To transpose means to write or play music in some key other than the original. The key signatures that we've seen so far must be memorized, not only by the number of accidentals involved, but also their order and placement on the staff. Notice that the pattern of placing the sharps on the staff changes at the 5th sharp for both the treble and bass clefs. Try saying aloud the order of accidentals for sharps: F, C, G, D, A, E, B. And for flats: B, E, A, D, G, C, F, until you feel confident with them. Another way to remember them is to use a pneumatic device. So for our sharps, F, C, G, D, A, E, B, we can think of Father Charles goes down and ends battle. Then for our flats, it's the reverse. Battle ends and down goes Charles' father. Key signatures are written in much the same way using the alto and tenor clef as are for treble and bass. The only exception is the placement of sharps in the tenor clef, as you can see here in this example. Some people find it easier to memorize key signatures if they visualize a circle of fifths, which is a diagram somewhat like the face of a clock. Reading clockwise around the circle of fifths, you will see that each new key begins on 5, or the 5th scale degree of the previous key. So if we start at the top, we go C, C, D, E, F, G, G, A, B, C, D, D, E, F, G, A, and so on and so forth. At this point, could you please go over to Forms and fill out checkpoint 1, and then complete the questions in section 1-2. Continuing on, minor scales. Musicians traditionally practice and memorize 3 minor scale formations, although these are simplifications of how minor keys actually work, as we will see later on. One of these is the natural minor scale. You can see from the illustration that the natural minor scale is like a major scale, with a lowered 3rd, 6th, and 7th scale degree. So here we see our C major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and our C natural minor being C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. Another minor scale type is the harmonic minor scale, which can be thought of as a major with a lowered 3 and 6. So here in our C harmonic minor scale, we go C, D, E flat, like the natural, F, G, A flat, also like the natural, but here the B is not flatted. third type of minor scale is the melodic minor scale, which has an ascending form and a descending form. Ascending meaning going up and descending meaning going down. The ascending form, shown here, is like a major with only a lowered third. So we have C, D, E flat, like the natural and the harmonic, and then the rest is like our major scale. The descending form of the melodic minor scale is the same as the natural minor scale. The three minor scale types are summarized here. The scale degree that differ from the major scale are circled, and please notice the arrows used in connection with the melodic minor scale in order to distinguish the descending 6/7 from the ascending 6/7. Minor key signatures. Minor key signatures conform to the natural minor scale no matter which minor scale type is actually in use. Looking back at the previous example, you can see that the natural minor scale on C requires three accidentals: B flat, E flat, and A flat. The key signature of C minor, then, is the same as the key signature for E flat major. C minor and E flat major are said to be relatives because they share the same key signature. We call them relatives. The third scale degree of any minor key is the first scale degree of its relative major. And the sixth scale degree of any major key is the first scale degree of its relative minor. If a major scale and a minor scale share the same one, as do C major and C minor, for example, they are said to be parallel. We would say that C major is the parallel minor to C minor. The circle of fifths is a convenient way to display the names of the minor keys and the relative majors as well as their key signatures. In this diagram, the names of the minor keys are in lowercase, as usual, and they are inside the diagram. So this might be also a good time to point out that when we're using letters for major keys, we use uppercase letters, and we use letters for minor keys. They're lowercase letters. You may find it easier to learn the minor scales in terms of their relative majors, as in the circle of fifths diagram, instead of the terms of the parallel majors, which is how minor scales are introduced. This will be most helpful regarding the keys of G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp, which have no parallel major form. If you do use the relative major approach, remember that the key signature for any minor scale conforms to the natural minor scale, and that accidentals must be used in order to spell the other forms. Specifically, you have to raise the seventh scale degree of the natural minor scale to produce the harmonic minor scale, and raise 6 and 7 of the natural minor scale to get the ascending form of the melodic minor scale. This example illustrates the spelling for the related keys of F major and D minor. So first we have our F major scale. Then we have its relative minor. So that is the same key signature, but the minor form. So in this case, it starts on D. Then the natural form becomes the harmonic form, where we raise the seventh. Finally, the melodic form, where we raise the sixth and the seventh on the way up, but lower them on the way down. One final hint. A quick way to find any minor key signature other than G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp is to begin with the key signature of the parallel major and to add 3 flats, or to subtract 3 sharps. So, we can see here that the key of B flat major has 2 flats. So if we add 3 flats to that, we would have 5 flats and it would become B flat minor. For E major, it has 4 sharps in its key signature. So instead of adding flats, we take away sharps. So we remove 3 sharps, leaving us with 1 sharp, and that would be our E minor. We can also see D here. It is very important to practice faithfully all the major and minor scales on an instrument until they become memorized patterns. An intellectual understanding of scales cannot substitute for the secure tactile and oral familiarity that will result from those hours of practice. Please take the time now to work on exercise 1-3. Scale. Thanks for being here with us, and we'll see you next month.